With what is soon to be the fourth entry to the Dark Aether story coming up later this year, I wanted to take a moment to reflect and talk about how the idea of the Dark Aether itself has evolved over the years. Despite now being a main and central focus of the current zombie storyline, it weren't too long ago that if you were to utter its name, you would be effectively discussing a facet of the deep lore. First mentioned by name in a cipher from Dark Aether, and later within the timeline released around the time of Zombies Chronicles, the Dark Aether exists today as the culmination of ideas presented earlier in the story, sometimes misconstrued as, or perhaps even the progenitor of hell itself. The Dark Aether has been known by many names, such as the Dimension of Death, or even the place below creation. We'll put a pin in it for now, but just know that that latter term here is of particular significance for this video. For now, we'll focus on the history of the Dark Aether within the lore, and we will see where that leads us. As stated earlier, the very first explicit mention of the Dark Aether comes from a cipher in Dark Aether, the third DLC map for the Black Ops 3 Zombies experience. The cipher itself reads, "Once the Great War ended with the defeat of the Apothicons, the Keepers ascended to become the wards of all universes. The surviving Apothicons were cast out, banished to the Dark Aether beneath creation. After aeons of exile in the Dark Aether, the Apothicons evolved into twisted creatures that now bear little resemblance to their Keeper brethren. The Apothicons' ceaseless desire is to re-enter creation, to consume and corrupt all the universes. It is the Keepers that guard against these perpetual attempts to re-enter creation, and guard against any beings that may have fallen under the influence of the Apothicons. It is here where we learn a good amount of the true significance of this other realm within the Aether story. It is where the Apothicons were banished following their defeat in the War of Agartha. It's the reason that these once corrupted Keepers were turned into twisted monsters that we now see them as. Looking at the timeline, we can garner further information. Here we learn that the Keepers, once corrupted by the Dark Aether, created the MPD, a device of absolute power meant to rival and be the Dark Aether equivalent of the summoning key. Let's continue following this through line, tracing our steps backwards throughout the story, returning to the map which introduced the MPD, Moon. It is here in the ultimate map within the Black Ops 1 Zombies experience where Ultimus Richtofen's grand scheme takes place, and he swaps bodies with Samantha, the previous denizen of the Aether Pyramid. One thing of note here occurs just prior to Richtofen's victory via a quote from Samantha.
"The blackness will swallow your pride! Something far more terrible than you lies here!"
It's simple and short, a sentence you might miss at first, but this is exceptionally important as it's the very first explicit mention of any sort of darker force at play in the story, forces that we would eventually come to know as the Apothicons, and depending on your view of the story, the Keepers as well. But beyond this, forces that would be inspired by the very darkness mentioned here, the blackness at the heart of it all, and which would later manifest in the story as the Dark Aether. Looking at the rest of Black Ops 1 Zombies, we can find a few other hints towards its darkness. Two hints which predate this mention, and in fact, come from Kino der Toten, the very first map in the game. The first of which, and one you likely know of, comes in the form of the Faust poster in the starting room, which is in reference to a famous German tale in which a man makes a deal with the devil. Yet another allusion in the backdrop towards darker forces being at play, and which would later manifest not only in Black Ops 1, but also later in the story, when it would be revealed that the voices within Ultimus Richtofen's head were that of the Shadow Man, influencing and guiding him along his journey. The second hint comes in the form of one of the rooms you can teleport to within the map, the ominous bloody variant of Samantha's bedroom, in which the window is open, implying that the darkness that has flooded the room came from outside. Now that we've established the beginnings of the concept within the mode, let's continue tracing it back up to and beyond where we started this journey today. Our next stop is in the Black Ops 2 map, Nuketown Zombies, specifically in the loading screen for the map, in which we can see the name Mictlantecuhtli cut off in the bottom left hand corner. In Aztec mythology, Mictlantecuhtli is the god of death and is the Aztec ruler of the underworld, a realm known as Mictlan. This is followed up on soon after in the map Mob of the Dead, a map which boasts hellish overtones, set in a purgatory where four souls are forced to relive the last sin they committed prior to their death, over and over. The illusion here is obvious, and is reinforced by the inclusion of the three dog heads, a reference to the three-headed guard dog of the underworld in Greek mythology, Cerberus. It is said that on the journey to Mictlan, the souls of the damned must pass a certain set of challenges, such as passing through a field with wind that blows flesh-scraping knives, and crossing a river of blood that's guarded by fearsome jaguars. Looking into the map itself, the flesh-scraping knives are quite easily found, with an abundance of the undead having been stuck with a plethora of glass shards. And while Mob of the Dead may not have any sort of river we have to cross, nor fearsome jaguars, its follow-up, however, Blood of the Dead, does have a catwalk we must cross in order to gain access to the prison, surrounded by lava and fearsome hellhounds in lieu of jaguars. The Aztec connection to this dark force is strengthened when looking back to Moon, as the large interface at the front of the MPD is actually a calendar which is relevant to both the Aztec and Mayan cultures. Thinking on it now, a similar calendar can also be found in Call of the Dead, right next to where Ultimates are trapped. Even in Buried, Richthofen, who at that time is in the Aether Pyramid, makes mention that not only is he having to deal with just one form of energy, that being of the Aether itself, of which he is currently vying for control of, but that there are two energies, and that they are polar opposites of one another.
This talk of energy is so vague, yeah? It's best not to worry about it. Just think of the big ones. Positive or negative. North or south. Light or dark. Good or...
This all leads us back to where we started this video. We've gone full circle, back to Black Ops 3, and into the map where we first meet the Apothicans and the Keepers face to face, Shadows of Evil. A map where once again 4 sinners awaken in a purgatory of their own, forced to confront their sins and are punished for them. It's here where the Apothicans attempt and succeed to re-enter creation, destroying Dimension 63. There's that word again, creation. As seen throughout this video, and especially in the latter halves of the story, the Dark Aether is referred to as a place beneath creation. It's here where we must consider what it means to exist outside of creation itself. It would mean to exist in the void, the abyss. It's here where we can really get a sense of how the Dark Aether itself has evolved over the years, from general ideas of good versus evil, heaven versus hell, to the idea that it's a place of pure emptiness and darkness. Even this is a far cry from how we would come to know the Dark Aether in its current form, as opposed to being a void of emptiness we find in Cold War Zombies and Beyond, that is actually a universe in its own right, complete with planets and solar systems, a place teeming with life and rich environments. It's likely that this can be accounted for simply by the writers not exactly knowing what they wanted to do with the Dark Aether upon its first explicit introduction in Black Ops 3. After all, they just opened up a whole new can of worms before they could even finish the first can. By the time of Black Ops 4, however, and especially by the time of Tag der Toten, I'd be inclined to believe that the idea had evolved some, since they initially outwardly presented it in Black Ops 3, and yet, here it is, still being referred to as the place beneath creation in the final map of the Aether saga. Personally, I believe that this has quite a bit more to do with the Keepers and how they, throughout the story, have omitted certain truths, this being one of them. For the Dark Aether to them was the ultimate taboo, and one which their oldest brethren were paid dearly for. Though, that is a topic for another time. One final thing I'd like to touch on today is the nature of the Dark Aether as it is presented to us in Cold War Zombies. How we see it here is that of an endless violet twilight, a purple hellscape, one which has the aesthetic and feel of an ocean, from the distorted whale calls in its ambiance, to the jellyfish above and the bioluminescent algae which litters the ground below. The answer here to why it is presented this way, much like the rest of the topics within today's video, has less to do with the actual lore itself, but more to do with the concept and thematics of it all. Throughout the previous story, the Aether had always been represented as an icy blue, and the Dark Aether as red, as if indicative of hellfire itself. In the final moments of the Aether, the ice is melted, and the ocean that remains is cast downward, combining the two in the darkness below.